Ian Curtis's illness began to cast a shadow over Joy Division, leaving those around him grappling with survivor's guilt that lingers to this day, despite their youth at the time. He was one of the most unique voices to emerge from post-war Britain, transforming his pain, isolation, and seizures into a cold, mesmerizing sound that captivated the world. But reducing Ian Curtis to just the frontman of a cult band called Joy Division, known for writing "Love Will Tear Us Apart" and dying at 23, misses a story far more profound and heart-wrenching than any of his songs. Once a bored office clerk, a depressed teenager who nearly died from a prescription pill overdose at 16, a husband who married at 19, became a father, and had an affair before fully grasping the meaning of love, he was an artist with epilepsy who still took the stage, dancing as if his own music was tearing him apart. This is the story of Ian Curtis, not just a post-punk icon, but the embodiment of a desperate, silenced generation, a story only now fully coming to light. Born on July 15, 1956, in Stretford, Greater Manchester, Ian grew up in a post-industrial suburb of smoky roads, red brick walls, and perpetually grey skies. His family soon moved to Macclesfield, a quiet town where normalcy and stability were expected. The Curtis household was typical of working-class post-war Britain. His father, Kevin, an aerospace engineer, was practical and precise. His mother, Doreen, a reserved clerk, rarely showed emotion. In such an environment, a child's feelings were often dismissed as impractical. Ian stood out from other kids. He didn't care for sports, jokes, or friend groups, preferring to sit alone with books, particularly poetry and classic literature. He was drawn to Wordsworth's verses on loneliness, death, and identity, and as a teenager, he dove into existential philosophy, grappling with life's apparent meaninglessness. Friends recall how, by 14 or 15, he spoke of death with a detached rationality, as if studying it rather than fearing it. At 16, he was hospitalized after overdosing on pills prescribed for headaches and anxiety, an incident his family called accidental but others saw as a deliberate brush with death, a test of whether the world noticed his existence. Surviving it only made him quieter, more introspective, and detached, with school feeling like an emotional cage in a conservative society that demanded stoic masculinity. Ian had no one to truly confide in. After school, he skipped university and took a job at Macclesfield's employment centre, helping the unemployed and disabled find work. There, he encountered lives darker than his own, observing them without judgment, as if storing their stories for something yet to take shape. One client, a young woman with epilepsy, left a lasting mark when she died in her sleep after a seizure, haunting Ian and planting the seed for his song "She's Lost Control." Soon after, he began experiencing similar symptoms: headaches, numbness, blackouts, and seizures, foreshadowing his own fate. At 19, in 1975, Ian married his teenage girlfriend, Deborah Woodruff, following the societal script of marriage and homeownership. But Deborah later admitted they were too young, both unhappy and emotionally paralyzed, trapped in a life they weren't ready for. Music wasn't yet Ian's career, just an escape where he could voice what real life stifled, unaware it would both save and destroy him. In the summer of 1976, Ian stood in a cramped Manchester room at the Lesser Free Trade Hall, watching the Sex Pistols perform alongside future Joy Division members Peter Hook and Bernard Sumner. That night, a cultural shockwave hit Manchester's stagnant music scene, inspiring unemployed youth seeking more than dull routines. Hook borrowed money for a bass, Sumner bought a guitar, and with drummer Terry Mason, they formed a band, needing only a singer. Ian, already known in the local punk scene, joined without an audition, chosen not for technical skill but for his magnetic presence. They started as Warsaw, playing raw punk inspired by David Bowie's song of the same name, but Ian's lyrics set them apart, focusing on death, emptiness, and inner turmoil rather than typical punk themes like politics or rebellion. In 1978, to avoid confusion with another band, they became Joy Division, a name drawn from the grim historical context of Nazi brothels, sparking controversy especially with their debut EP's cover featuring a Hitler Youth drummer. Critics accused them of fascist leanings, but it was a deliberate provocation, not an endorsement. Their early music was rough, with simple chords and aggressive tempos, but Ian's lyrics, written quietly as if translating sound into obsession, gave it a unique, dark tone. On stage, Ian transformed, his wild, convulsive movements mistaken by audiences as performance art inspired by Iggy Pop or Bowie, when in reality, they were often triggered by his seizures, blurring the line between art and illness. By 1979, Joy Division caught the attention of the alternative press and signed with Factory Records under producer Tony Wilson. Their debut album, Unknown Pleasures, recorded with Martin Hannett, traded punk's raw energy for a cold, expansive sound with delay, ambient noise, and synths. Some fans disliked the shift, but Hannett crafted a sonic space where Ian's loneliness echoed like a cry for help, marking Joy Division as post-punk pioneers. When Unknown Pleasures dropped in June 1979, its stark, alienating sound, devoid of romantic lyrics or flashy solos, redefined music, earning praise as a sonic explosion and cementing Joy Division's place at the forefront of post-punk. Hannett's production, using digital delay and silence as tools, created an atmosphere like an abandoned railway station, resonating with a hauntingly modern feel even decades later. The band toured the UK and Europe, appeared on BBC Two, and planned a US tour for 1980, quickly becoming Manchester's most significant act since the Beatles. Their second album, Closer, recorded in late 1979, was even darker, with tracks like Atrocity Exhibition and 24 Hours reflecting despair and ritualistic heaviness. She's Lost Control, inspired by Ian's epilepsy experience, captured the chaos of a seizure in its erratic drums and urgent vocals. Love Will Tear Us Apart, a standalone single, became their mainstream breakthrough with its accessible melody and sharp lyrics dissecting a decaying relationship, recorded with a refined edge at Pink Floyd's Britannia Row studio. Before music consumed him, Ian's life followed the predictable rhythm of post-war Britain: school, a clerical job, and early marriage. He and Deborah wed in 1975, settling into a modest house with a mortgage and monotonous jobs, but stability soon felt suffocating. Their daughter, Natalie, born in 1979, didn't ease Ian's depression, it deepened his fear of inadequacy. As Joy Division toured Europe, Ian met Annick Honoré, a Belgian journalist, forming an ambiguous bond, part friendship, part emotional refuge. His letters to her revealed a side he hid from his wife and bandmates, while Deborah, sensing the distance, found the letters and began divorce proceedings. Ian didn't fight or leave, staying in limbo as his seizures worsened, sometimes striking on stage, like during a London show where a strobe light triggered a collapse. Prescribed heavy anticonvulsants and sedatives, Ian suffered mood swings, insomnia, and hallucinations, his personality shifting alarmingly. Friends noticed he was no longer himself, with Peter Hook suspecting misdiagnosis or overmedication. Ian's journal and letters grew desperate, his lyrics predicting collapse, reflecting a mind slipping away. By early 1980, Joy Division stood on the brink of global success, but Ian was unraveling. His seizures intensified, and the side effects of his medications, insomnia, anxiety, depression, pushed him into a spiral. In April, he attempted suicide by overdosing on pills but was saved. Despite pleas to cancel the US tour, he insisted on continuing. In his final weeks, he barely slept or ate, spending nights writing, listening to Iggy Pop's The Idiot, and watching Strawshack, a film about a musician's isolated end. On May 17, 1980, hours before his US flight, Ian asked Deborah to visit. They talked, but she refused to halt the divorce. Staying overnight in separate rooms, she left in the morning as Ian requested, returning later to find he had hanged himself in their kitchen, a cooling coffee cup and a spinning record nearby. A note to a neighbor expressed hope for reconciliation after the tour, leaving many to question whether his death was intentional or a desperate act born of exhaustion, medication, and loneliness. He was 23. Joy Division existed for just 4 years, but their legacy endures. Closer, released posthumously, is hailed as a post-punk masterpiece, comparable to albums like OK Computer. Ian's raw, trembling baritone and unflinching lyrics, stripped of drama or concealment, became a psychological touchstone, influencing bands like The Cure, Nine Inch Nails, and Radiohead. New Order, formed by the remaining members, carried his spirit into synth pop, but Ian remained irreplaceable. His story, captured in the 2007 film Control, resonates as a universal struggle between duty and freedom. In Macclesfield, fans still visit, though a statue in his honor was controversially removed. Ian Curtis wasn't a celebrity or a commodity, he was a raw, open wound, giving voice to the lost and silenced, a reminder to speak of what's often left unsaid.